Welcome to the WAC Podcast Special Edition for WAC Vegas. Eric Danner, Kendra Sheehan, joined by Kyle McDonald, the founder of WAC Hoops Nation. And Kyle, I think this is the fourth or fifth year in a row we've had you on the show, special WAC Vegas edition. So thank you for joining us. I think you're at your home in Utah.
Yeah, I think it's the first time I'm not on the road when we do this podcast. I know 2 years ago I was at the Albuquerque airport.
Yes.
Sitting there talking to you guys. And then last year, I believe I was in my hotel room at the Orleans, and you guys were in some hall, if I remember right. So
We should have had you come down, as it turns out.
you should have, but it's nice to be here officially in my own home right now because, we drive down Tuesday morning for the tournament. So it's always a blast to be talking to you guys ahead of WAC Vegas, which we're all looking forward to. Absolutely.
Yeah, hard to believe. You look at it last year and it's Monday and so this will go out on Tuesday. So it's 6 o'clock Central Time right now. We'd be looking at almost game 3 of day 1 last year. And here we are in the comfort of our own home still. So there's fewer teams. So maybe more importance on the regular season this year, Kyle. Let's start on the men's side. Of course, GCU wins the regular season. We have Tarleton State, the great story there. But day 1, the first matchup on the men's side is going to be at 6 o'clock, the 8 versus 5. And this is a pretty interesting matchup in terms of that we have California Baptist taking on Utah Valley. CBU has been a team that has been in not so great the last half of the year, if that's fair to say, and Utah Valley maybe the hottest team in the league.
Yeah, I mean, that Dom Daniels injury to CBU when they lost in that heartbreaker to CLU in Riverside, that kind of I don't want to say depleted him, but it did because he was leading the WAC in scoring at that point. And he hasn't played, so he's not going to play in the WAC tournament either. So they've had a tough time scoring points. I mean, they did stay with GCU in Phoenix when they were there a couple weeks ago. But it just hasn't been good. They got the win over UT Arlington right after Dom Daniels' injury, but then it's just been downhill from there. And you talk about Utah Valley, they gave Ethan Potter a shot at SFA when they lost, late in that game. And he stepped into a starting role, and they've lost one game since he's started down the stretch. They won 7 of 8. They just swept that West Texas road trip that GCU doesn't want to remember because that almost cost them a regular season title. Not many teams sweep Tarleton and ACU on the road, but they did it to end the regular season. Todd Phillips at 16 wins, that's more wins than any first-year coach at Utah Valley, except for maybe Dick Hunsaker back in the early 2000s. So heck of a job by Todd Phillips, but Ethan Potter, the difference maker for Utah Valley. And here's the thing, Eric, with that matchup, that CBU Utah Valley matchup, that'll be the rubber match between the two. Utah Valley's already swept the Lancers this year. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, but when you have so much momentum going into a conference tournament, and here's the good news for Utah Valley with that momentum. They only have a few days off. They don't have to wait a week to play again, which is huge. And CBU, you just don't know where their mindset's going to be because they basically got in because Utah Tech lost at SFA to end the regular season. So, man, it's a fun matchup, but which teams are you going to get? Are you going to get the Red Hot Wolverines or the one that struggled before the last half of the season? Or are you going to get a CBU team that was really good before the Dom Daniels injury? It's just hard to say. And like I said, beating a team 3 times is hard.
Another good opening round matchup, Abilene Christian, Stephen F. Austin. The Wildcats have just caught fire as of late. They've won 7 of their last 8. They just went on a 7-game win streak before falling this past weekend. Matched up against Stephen F. Austin, who's had a couple injuries. Their season in the past couple of years tends to be derailed by injuries. What do you see from this matchup with a red-hot Wildcats team and then a Stephen F. Austin team that just got into the tournament and has a little bit of momentum as well?
Yeah, you talk about that SFA squad. They won 2 games at home to end the regular season by double digits, both by double digits. This is the first year since they've been in the WAC that they got to finish their regular season at home. Because 2 years ago when they won a share of the regular season title, they had to win at UTRGV to clinch a share of it. Last year, they were on the road at Utah Valley to end the regular season before just going to Vegas. So, one, they got to be home for a full week and sleep in their beds. Two, they got AJ Kajust back in a big way this week. Their ball handler, point guard, he was out with the elbow injury for, almost 2 months. But he came back. They won by double digits. And I think SFA could be a team to watch in this tournament because of that notion. The way they play defense. Now they can move Latrell Giselle back to his 2 spot, off the ball. And Matt Heyman can do the same thing where AJ could use the ball handle. And they got the bigs to match up too. ACU, like you said, they won 7 and 8. They played their way into WAC Vegas, right? I thought they were dead to the water a month and a half ago after they got beat by, I think it was like 29 at Utah Valley. And they won 7 straight after that to play their way into WAC Vegas. If people are paying attention to this podcast, Arion Simmons, just watch that dude. If his body language is good, ACU is doing good things, right? And then you got Ali Deba, who was a second team all WAC selection, but that guy can score on anybody. Plus, he usually defends the best player on the opposing team. So, and here's the kicker, Eric and Kendra. The first game came down to overtime. There was a 3-pointer that somebody had to hit from SFA to send it into overtime, where the Jacks won in overtime at Moody Coliseum. And then back in Nacogdoches at the Sawmill, Arion Simmons hit that runner with 5 seconds to go to give ACU. So this is like a rivalry game. Brett Tanner's coached at SFA. SFA has, or ACU has an SFA former SFA player on his staff. Like, it's so crazy, the tie-ins between these two teams. And here's the kicker. Here's the best part about this bracket. All the purple schools are on the men's side, on one side of the bracket. Or I shouldn't say all the purple. That's the women's side. Excuse me. All the Texas schools are on one side, and all the non-Texas schools are on the other side. So who's going to be the Texas champion and who's going to be the non-Texas champion, I guess you could say.
It's like wrestling back in the day, Kyle. I don't know if you ever watched the pro wrestling. They said the Texas champion, and then they had like the WCW champion. But it is interesting, and Kendra and I have not had an opportunity to talk to almost all the coaches in this week's tournament, and we've heard several of them say just the different styles between when you're in Texas and when you're on the West Coast or in the Mountain Time Zone, where it's more of a high flying kind of a way of playing basketball as opposed to maybe a more grinded out kind of basketball. But this SFA ACU matchup in round 1, I mean, this this is a great matchup. You talked about it. ACU, they beat Grand in that win streak. They beat Grand Canyon. Yep. They beat Seattle U. They beat some really good teams. They seem to have captured some of that magic from a couple of years ago when they beat Texas in the NCAA tournament. Arion Simmons is part of that. Kendra and I joke that we have, who's the new Johnny McCants of the WAC? Is it Arion Simmons? Is it Gabe McLaughlin? Is it Cam Tyson? Seems like they've all been around for about 6 or 7 years. But having that kind of veteran leadership in this game, but then you look at SFA's side, you mentioned they get some players back from injuries. You look at some of the depth that they have. If they get it going, wow, that's and that's a part of the fun of having a 6-7 matchup. Just the way the tournament is set up, you don't have a 7 playing a 2 and a 6 playing a 3. This is what I love about our format, that you have a 6-7, 2 teams very evenly matched up.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, the teams in Texas play a different style of basketball than the teams outside of Texas, right? I mean, that trip that GCU took to Tarleton ACU, Bryce Drew, his post-game comments, we won't go into that, but like you could tell there was just a different style that maybe teams aren't used to. So it'll be interesting to see them go against each other for a third time, especially with so much on the line. And we saw ACU 2 years ago make that run through the WAC tournament to the WAC tournament championship. I think they ran into a New Mexico State team that was super motivated because of what happened in 2021. And they ran out of gas. I think they had to win 5 in 5 days or something like that 2 years ago, if I remember right. But Brett Tanner's been here before. Kyle Keller's been here before. You know, they both have veterans on their squad, right? SFA, Latrell Giselle, Nana Antwibo Boisiaco. I hope I don't botch that name. There's just Matt Heyman's been there a few years. Latrell, AJ Kajus has been there a few years. Jaleel Bolbrin's been there a few years. And they got Frank Stain from Utah Tech who can shoot it, right? And adds another scoring dimension to them. Brett Tanner has guys that have been there forever too. Arion Simmons, Cam Steele, Hunter Jack Madden. Ali Diba's been there a couple of years now. You know, just these guys. And Leo Betial has been better for the Wildcats down the street. So the matchup is so fun because they're so similar in the way that they play and get after each other defensively. But both of them can score a lot of points, and we've seen that before from these two teams. So, yeah, it's a big-time matchup on Wednesday night to cap the first night of WAC Vegas.
Then when we get to day 2, Seattle U, our team that was the 4 seed, so they got the bye in the first round, will match up against either California Baptist, Utah Valley. Seattle U, I'm always excited about to see. They seem to have a great regular season, but the past 2 years in Vegas, you know, they've been one and done. They've earned byes to the semifinals 2 years ago, and they got one and done. And then last year they lost in one of the opening rounds. And so this is an exciting matchup for me, just in terms of how will Seattle U play? Will they, you know, be that red hot team? But also when you look up the matchups, you know, California Baptist and Utah Valley, those were all such close games in the regular season. As I was pulling up the schedule, you know, when they played California Baptist, it was a 1-point win. Utah Valley, 1-point win. So these are so evenly matched teams. What do you anticipate from this matchup with the Red Hawks getting an extra day of rest?
Well, the one thing I would love to see, and people are listening might get mad at me for saying this, I'd love to see Cam Tyson lead the Red Hawks on a run. Like what he's done since he's come to Seattle, you come back home. Let's say come back home because he's from the Seattle area, right? 23 wins his first year, share the WAC regular season title. 20 wins last season, right? They're at 18 and 11 right now, or something like that overall. You know, they could get 3 straight 21 seasons if they get 2 wins to get to the WAC tournament championship. So I would love to see the Red Hawks, Cam Tyson, make a run, right? They can because they can score and they have bigs and Kobe Williamson and Brent Chatfield. The question is, can they get out of the funk that they found themselves in Texas this week, where they didn't score 60 points against ACU? They struggled offensively against Tarleton. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a tough road trip, but Utah Valley proved that you can win at both places, right? So, and then you go, Kendra, you mentioned the CBU games. Like, it was a buzzer beater to beat CBU at the Red Hawk Center, right? And one that is questionable with what the review looked like. And then the Kobe Williamson and one, right, to end the game in Riverside to give the Red Hawks the win there. And then Utah Valley, Seattle U games are always fun. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was 2021, I was up there when the Wolverines went up to play the Red Hawks. It ended up being like 93-92 Utah Valley. And can't remember if it was overtime or double overtime, one of the two, but Trey Woodbury hit a 3 from the top of the key to win the game. So it's like whoever Seattle U matches up with, either the Lancers or the Wolverines, it's going to be fantastic basketball because the games are always so good. And they're so well matched with each other that it's like toss a coin to pick who you're going to, you know, advance on to play at GCU in the semifinals.
Yeah, and Kendra mentioned, I mean, these Seattle U one and done the last 2 years. Utah Valley seemed like last year was going to be their year. They lose in the semifinals. So both teams haven't had the luck in Las Vegas, since we're talking Vegas the past few years. That other semifinal, or I'm sorry, the other quarterfinal matchup, UTA awaits the winner of that SFA versus Tarleton State, or excuse me, SFA versus Abilene Christian game. UTA, I think, Kyle, and maybe you have a better pulse of people around the league. That's a team you don't want to face in the tournament. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah. So first, I want to go back to Utah Valley losing the semifinals last year. I'm still heartbroken about that because I am a UVU guy. But I want to make a statement that I did sit there on press row and tell the people around me with about 15 and a half minutes to go. I was like, this game's not over. And it wasn't over, obviously. But anyways, I a couple weeks ago on a podcast episode, it was either a podcast or one of our live streams, I said that nobody wants to see UT Arlington in WAC Vegas. And that's kind of the mood that I hear from a lot of people, because they have won 7 straight. KT Turner has done a phenomenal job in his first year. They have guys that are veterans who have been around. Philip Russell went to the NCAA tournament last year with Southeast Missouri, so he's been here before, right? Dejuan Gordon's been playing out of his mind down the stretch. They have the WAC freshman of the year, Makai Williams. They have multiple guys who can score. Aaron Cash has been really good. He was really good on the road trip at Seattle and at Utah Valley. And Samar Wilson is that paint presence that he was out last year down the stretch for the Mavericks as they got into WAC Vegas. Didn't play in WAC Vegas last year. So I tell you what, they can shoot the 3, they can defend, and they can finish at the rim because they have so much athleticism. I don't think anybody wants to see UT Arlington. Plus, they had GCU on the ropes twice this year. Probably should have won both games that they played against the Lopes. They're playing dynamite basketball down the stretch here, and I think there's a little bit of a chip there to prove something that, they belong, and they've done it all season long, and they're playing their best basketball down the stretch. So yeah, I'm not sure if ACU or SFA want to see UT Arlington, but I mean, it's WAC Vegas and anything can happen, right? Like, it's just, we've seen it year after year. Anything, I mean, yeah, we go into all the things we've seen over the past couple of years, and it's like, take your pick. But I honestly think UT Arlington, nobody wants to see them right now, the way that they're playing.
No, they're playing so well. And even, Abilene Christian, I could see them also going on a Cinderella run, but they'd have to get past UT Arlington, also Stephen F. Austin. As we go back to the top of the bracket, we see our number 1 seed in Grand Canyon taking on either Seattle U, California Baptist, or Utah Valley. I mean, the Lopes have just an absolutely stacked roster this year. I think when you look at them, it's one of the best and deepest, in the league. And Gabe McLaughlin, Tyon Grant Foster, Colin Moore, Ray Harrison, you get Javon Blacksher Jr. back, with all those guys, especially Blacksher, coming back from his injury, getting a few more minutes. How can a team slow down Grand Canyon when they're at their best, playing in WAC Vegas, where they've had so much success in the past?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I can answer that. I mean, we've seen it over the years, right? That the only team to beat GCU at Orleans Arena is no longer in the league. Nobody else has beaten GCU at Orleans Arena. So like, we saw it last year, the run that they went on, where they shot like 60% from 3-point range for the 3 days they were at Orleans Arena, right? And that's how they won the tournament, was they shot the lights out. This year they can do it again, but they have different pieces this year. I mean, you talk about WAC Player of the Year, Tyon Grant Foster, who is 6'7" and can play 1 through 4 on the floor. Like, he could play multiple different positions. He can light it up from 3, or he can finish at the rim. We've seen some crazy layups, dunks, whatever you want to call it, from the WAC Player of the Year this year, who leads the league in scoring. And then, you get Colin Moore, who's a role guy who's played his role to perfection, right? Ray Harrison was the WAC tournament MVP last year after going on, I think he had a couple 30-point games in that tournament. And yet he's a second-team All-WAC member this year, right? So, and he's played more of the point guard role, which is a little different than what he did last year. The biggest key for me is the fact that, one, Javon Blackshear is playing better now, coming back off that knee injury. And Luke War, where did that guy come from? Like, the last 3 or 4 weeks, he shot the lights out, and he's been a defensive presence too off the bench, which early in the season, they didn't have the depth off the bench or the production off the bench that they get now. Choose your poison. Who are you going to try and stop? Because somebody's going to beat you. I mean, think about this. Last year in that WAC tournament, one of the nights Ray Harrison had off, Gabe McLaughlin goes for 30-plus points, right? Another night in the WAC semifinals, it was Kobe Knox and Noah Bauman lighting it up from 3-point range. Like I remember Jason Hooten asking me, like, where did this guy come from? When Kobe Knox hit like 6 3-pointers in the first half. So that's what they have this year, though. They have different guys that can light it up on any given night. We've seen Tyon do it night in and night out, but Gabe can go for 20, 25. Colin Moore can go for 20. Duke Brennan had a big night at CBU to clinch that outright regular season title. And we're not even mentioning his name right now, but that's a double-double guy that could do it every night of WAC Vegas. So pick your poison. Who are you going to stop? Because somebody else is going to light you up. That's just the way that they've done it all year long. I will say this to both of you, and I think when you watch that Tarleton game and how the Texans beat GCU, they did to GCU down the stretch what GCU does to everybody else, and they attacked. They attacked, got to the free throw line, made things happen, either hit a bucket or forced a foul call, right? And if you're playing GCU, you cannot sit back and let them dictate, or else you're going to get blown out of the building, because they're so good at doing that. That's why they get to the free throw line. I believe they're top 10 in the country in getting to the free throw line, because they attack you. So it'll be interesting to see game plans in that WAC semifinal game on Friday.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tyon Grant Foster, the WAC Player of the Year. Colin Moore was named to the WAC All Defensive Team as well, and Gabe McLaughlin, as you mentioned, first team All WAC. Javon Blackshear is coming off the bench, WAC tournament MVP 2 years ago.
Yep.
So I mean, just the depth is incredible. But the thing about GCU this year, as they were making this run, and then they lost those 2 games in Texas. But before that happened, there were some games they're down double digits at Utah Tech. They were down double digits several games and kind of were able to turn it on kind of when at will. But then when we saw that Texas trip, okay, they are beatable. And the other thing there, Kyle, is we saw this happen 2 years ago with Seattle U. When you don't play until Friday, that's a good thing. You only got to win 1 game to get to the championship, like Gonzaga has done forever in the West Coast Conference. But at the same time, you could face a red hot team coming into that semifinal.
Yeah, and the tough thing for GCU this year is the WAC semifinal game will be just their second game in 2 weeks, because they had Thursday off last week. So they only played 1 game between. This will be just their second game on Friday in that semifinal game. So you wonder if that'll play into it. But I think that Texas trip woke up the Lopes, because if you look at it, the 3 wins they've had since that trip, all by 20-plus points. Now, granted, one was against UTRGV and one was against CBU, both teams that struggled down the stretch mightily. But is that just the notion that that's how good the Lopes were, that they kind of just coasted through, maybe got caught up, thinking they had everything wrapped up, didn't play particularly well down the stretch at ACU and at Tarleton, but then that just, what was it, the Pearl Harbor thing? I fear we have awoken a sleeping giant, which is maybe what we're seeing here, because like I said, they're playing real well these last 3 games. And, but we'll see if that 1 game or 2 games in 2 weeks really plays a factor in it. Because like you said, maybe there's a team that comes in hot and they just get rolling. So it'll be interesting to see, Eric, in that regard.
Tarleton State also getting the bye all the way to the semifinals. So if they win a game, they'll potentially face the 1 seed in Grand Canyon, which I think a lot of people are looking forward to. But when you look at this Tarleton State team, I mean, it just feels like they had the most new guys, I believe, in the country on their roster. And they go on an 11-game win streak, of won 11 of their last 12 games, I believe. And they just have so much veteran presence on the court. However, they are new to the program, but have many years, of experience. What can we expect from this Texans team that's so red hot and also has just a really neat story in Joseph Jones taking over for Billy Gillespie, and then just this team just having so much firepower the second half of the season?
Well, you think about it. I mean, you lose Freddie Hicks, you lose Shamir Bogues, you lose Secure Daniel, you lose Tiger Booker, you lose Javante Hopkins. Like that's everybody, right? Like that's everybody. And Freddie Hicks, I don't know if they won today or if they're still got to play, but he may be leading Arkansas State to the NCAA tournament, where his dad took Arkansas State to the tournament. So great story there. But after a 2-2 start, you get the news that Billy Gillespie takes that leave for medical circumstance, right? Joseph Jones becomes the interim head coach right before they go to the SoCal Challenge, and then they go win the SoCal Challenge, right? And since that time, I mean, it's just been fantastic to watch. I talked to Joseph Jones when I was there in December. They lost to Jacksonville State that night at Wisdom Gym, but he just said we put our hard hats on and go to work. And that's not just Joseph Jones' mentality. That's Billy Gillespie's, because Joseph Jones played for Billy Gillespie too, and they're like connected at the hip, right? But you look at this team, there's not a ton of size. Keandre Gotti's not like 6'7", 6'10" or taller, right? He's 6'7", 6'8" at best. But they just outwork people. Lou Williams, Ja'Cory Smith, Devin Barnes, they just outwork people. And they're Emmanuel Nascente at 6'7", playing the point guard position at times, and he's played over in Italy, so he knows how to play against more experienced players, right? So it's just a matter they outwork people, and they out physical people at times too. And there's just the coaching adjustments that you've seen Joseph Jones make from winning that SoCal Challenge to maybe some bumps in December and early January to now where they're at, and the fact that they had a chance to win a share of the regular season title. Yeah, they lost to Utah Valley, but to even be in that discussion with all that they lost, with the fact that they're having an interim / acting head coach, like, it's just remarkable. And like you said, Kendra, they have a chance to get to the WAC tournament final and maybe win the WAC tournament, right? Like they play with a chip, because story for you guys. When I was in Edinburgh, when Tarleton was down there for UTRGV, I believe Tarleton had finally come back, taking the lead. They had been down like 17 or 18 in that game. And I don't know if he did it on purpose or if he knew who I was. Maybe he saw my computer with the Straight Out of WAC sticker on the back of it. But Ja'Cory Smith looked over. He's like, hey. I think he was trying to point out, that they're better than what I had them in my preseason poll. But oh, good times. But yeah, I'm interested to see how they handle the time off, because they'll have almost a week off before their first game. Last year, they won their first WAC tournament game in school history, and then they lost to Utah Valley in the quarterfinals. So very interested to see what happens now that they got this double bye into the semifinals, and have a chance to go to the championship game with whoever they play. And they beat UT Arlington twice. So they beat SFA twice. I believe they swept ACU too. So they're 6-0 against all teams that they'll face. Can they beat whoever a third time? Because remember, beating a team 3 times in a season is very, very hard.
Yeah, Tarleton State, one of the best stories in the WAC this year. Joseph Jones named the WAC Coach of the Year as an acting head coach, not Billy Gillespie's coming back, just signed a new contract for 2 more years. So it'll be interesting to see how they react once they're in the tournament. Ran into the Tarleton team at the baggage claim at Love Field a couple weeks ago. It's amazing when you see Joseph Jones. I mean, he's like John
the tallest
Thompson
guy on that team, Eric. He's the tallest guy on that team.
And he's got some size to him. He's not he's not a skinny guy. He can post you up. But Keandre Gatti also named WAC Defensive Player of the Year, which goes to show this is voted on by the coaches. He didn't lead the league in block shots. He didn't lead the league in stolen or steals. But that's what he's regarded as a defender. And as you mentioned, I mean, not a very big team, and he's kind of been a little bit of a rim protector at 6'6".
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to point out too, this isn't a deep team, right? These starters play 30, 35 minutes, maybe even more most of the season. Adam Musa comes off the bench a little bit. But I mean, Dario Domingos doesn't play a ton. So Keandre Gatti plays almost 40 minutes per night. Unless he's in foul trouble. Like, that's the big thing. If you get him in foul trouble, they can have some issues there. But here's the thing. He plays defense without fouling. he rebounds and he gets after you without fouling, which is key for them to have success. So I just there's a mindset of knowing how to play basketball the right way, but yet still playing with a huge chip on your shoulder and getting after people that over the past 3 years, all of us that have watched this Tarleton basketball under Billy Gillespie, that that's what we're going to get every night, around in every game. But other people who haven't seen him don't understand how they're having so much success with maybe a smaller roster or guys playing a ton of minutes. Well, it's just the way that they're put together, and that's the expectation, and they know that when they come in, and it's been successful so far. And they're looking to make a pretty big statement for a fantastic and historic year, because this is the most wins of the Division I era right now that they have. So,
And we should point out, if they were to win the tournament, they're still transitioning from Division II, so they are not eligible for the NCAA tournament. I know our commissioner, Brian Thornton, has been a champion. That's why for these transitioning teams, that's why they're able to play in WAC Vegas and all of our other tournaments. But the NCAA still has that rule that within the first 4 years, you can't go to the big dance, which, we'll have to see if that ever changes. We saw Jared Olson win the tournament a few years ago on the women's side and not be able to go. But one last thing before we start talking women, we'll take a break and then we'll talk women, was you talked about UTRGV and how, that matchup with Tarleton. When you go back to that game that was in Stephenville and Hassan Abdul Hakim hits that great shot, looks like UTRGV is going to win a big game on the road early in the season. And then Ja'Cory Smith comes down and hits the game winner. I wonder, if you look back at that, if that doesn't happen, if they go on to have the season that they did.
Probably not. But again, UTRGV beat Tarleton at Wisdom Gym last year. So somehow Matt Feger, they might not win a lot of conference games, but somehow they find a way to beat Tarleton at some point. But yeah, sometimes a shot like that can just send you on a run, right? I mean, you look like you've lost a game to a team that probably shouldn't have been in the game to begin with. But Ja'Cory Smith, man, if people get a chance, watch the WAC tournament semifinal. It is on national television, that
Yes.
late game. So the national spotlight will be on Tarleton that night, and Ja'Cory Smith can put on a show. And it's a little unorthodox at times, the way he shoots or what he does. But man, he's a special player. And, I had him on my WAC preseason player of the year watch list, and he lived up to it. And, but yeah, a win like that could be, I think it gives you the different mindset that, okay, we can have some luck and still win ball games. I think they're the luckiest team percentage-wise in the Ken Palm rankings this year. Billy Gillespie even pointed that out to me last week when I spoke to him. So they have had a little bit of luck on their side this year, Eric.
The Ken Palm luck factor. You always got to factor that in. We're going to take a quick break, then we'll come back, break down the WAC women's basketball tournament. You're listening to the WAC podcast.
WAC Vegas is back. The best fans, championship basketball, all in exciting Las Vegas. Join us March 13th through the 16th at the Orleans Arena for the 2024 Hercules Tires WAC basketball tournament. Don't miss the crowning of a men's and women's champion. For more information, go to wacsports.com/WACVegas.
Welcome back to the WAC podcast. Kendra Sheehan along with Eric Danner, and also our special guest, founder of WAC Hoops Nation, Kyle McDonald. Welcome again. Broke down the men's bracket. A lot of fun. There's going to be so many close games. 8-team bracket, so 3 teams didn't get into the tournament this year. But moving to the women's side, we have California Baptist, who gets the #1 seed over Grand Canyon. That was an exciting last game of the regular season. We'll get into that. Utah Tech and Stephen F. Austin earning byes. And then we have our early first round games, and things kick off with Southern Utah and UT Arlington. The Thunderbirds, the 8 seed, the Mavericks, the 5 seed. Southern Utah, a team that won the WAC tournament last year, went to the NCAA tournament for the first time as a program. Now they were one of the last teams to sneak into the tournament And they're facing off against UT Arlington, who was a team that a lot of people counted out early on. They started the season 1-8. Then they turned things around after Colorado, go on a 7-game win streak, put themselves in position to, make it into the tournament, have a 5 seed. When you look at this matchup, not a lot of depth on Southern Utah's side, and UT Arlington's a team that has to play together. They don't have one standout player. What needs to happen, for one of these? Which team do you anticipate coming away with this first round game?
So for Tracy Mason's squad, the defending champs, the injury bug has depleted their entire roster, right? Like Tamika Whitman hasn't played a game this year. She was preseason all WAC. Megan Smith tore her ACL early in the season. She's been out. They lost Lizzie Williamson, who was a WAC defensive player of the year last year. Sharita Daughtry, who we saw have some, I want to say the biggest moment of the WAC tournament in 2023 last year against New Mexico State. So like completely depleted injury-wise and with the losses. They have to slow the game down. They have to make it muddy, because if they muddy this game up, they'll be able to win the ball game, because they're a half-court team. They're not really transition type, get out and run, do what you can, type team. They rely on execution. The Delaney Belina, and Samantha Johnson have been key. Ava Ulrich, who is a all WAC freshman team member this year. They play a different style when they're able to defend half court and they're able to execute on the offensive side. On the flip side, UT Arlington, they got to get out and run. They use their guards to just push pace. Talia Clark, the Seattle U transfer, who can knock down a 3. Gia Adams, who is is she the WAC newcomer? I can't remember the award. For the WAC Coop Nations fans, she was voted the WAC newcomer of the year. So, but she's been dynamite for Sharika Wright's crew. And, Adela Vakova, she has been very good in the paint for UT Arlington. Avery Brittingham, the SFA transfer, has been here before. UTA likes to score points. When they score points, they're tough to beat. I mean, they nearly pull off the upset over CBU in Arlington a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, before Chloe Webb's, layup with 2 seconds left gave the Lancers the win. If UT Arlington gets this in the 70s, maybe even the 80s, they're going to win the ball game, because I don't think Southern Utah has the offensive firepower to stay with the Lady Mavs. And the other thing is, here we go again. This is the season sweep for UT Arlington, so is the third time the charm for Southern Utah, who's looking to maybe make some noise at the WAC tournament after having all those injuries this season. So it'll be interesting to see who dictates the pace of this first round game of WAC Vegas on Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. It's morning for me. It's afternoon in Vegas, so all the times change.
Yeah, that'll be our noon. That'll be our first game in WAC Vegas, is that Southern Utah against UT Arlington. And G. Adams did make first team all WAC on the official WAC website. We don't have a newcomer of the year award.
Yeah,
we have a newcomer of the week every week, but then it's a freshman of the year. So it gets first team all WAC. Avery Brittingham named second team all WAC as well. On the other side of the bracket, it's going to be Tarleton State and Abilene Christian. Now going into the final week of the season, Kyle, everybody was alive for 2 spots. There's 5 teams alive for 2 spots, and these actually Abilene Christian clinched before that. Tarleton State under first-year head coach Bill Brock. How do you see this matchup shaking out as game number 2?
Yeah, how wild was it that it came down to the final day and it was still 2 teams or 5 teams for 2 spots? Like, it was still crazy that it came down to that on the final day of the regular season. 4 of the teams played each other, right? In Seattle U and Tarleton, and then Southern Utah and UTRGV, and Utah Valley had to beat ACU, which that obviously didn't happen. But it's crazy that came down to the final day of the regular season. You love to see it too, especially like a winner advances type game between Tarleton and Seattle U up there at the Red Hawk Center. But give credit to Bill Brock in his first year at Tarleton. Like, this was a team that won 2 WAC games last year, Bill Brock was brought in to maybe rejuvenate a little bit, and they played their way into WAC Vegas. You saw the video post game of their celebration, and on their board in the locker room, it said WAC Vegas or something right there. I just kudos to them, right? Faith Acker, Teresa De Silva, all of the Texans, kudos to them. And now they get a matchup against an Abilene Christian team that they split with this year, right? Abilene Christian won at Moody Coliseum. Tarleton won in Stephenville. Abilene Christian with the WAC freshman year in Peyton Hull, who I saw on Saturday at Utah Valley. She scored 12 of the first 14 points for the Wildcats. Like, she's a player. And I was talking to one of their assistants, and they're hoping they can keep her at Abilene Christian, but she's going to have other offers come in. So Julie Goodenough's team likes to play fast. Bella Earl is a triple-double waiting to happen. They did lose Aspen Thornton midway through February. Not sure what happened, but they keep their foot on the gas, and they take charges. They still have Addison Martin in the paint too. So this is going to be a fun ball game because two teams that know each other well, that have split the season series, now the rubber match for a survive and advance type situation, and both teams playing really well down the stretch. So again, it's another Texas matchup that it's going to be a fun, I think, fast-paced game in that first-round game between the Wildcats and the Texans.
Yeah, only separated by, 2 hours?
Yeah. Yep.
2 hours? Yeah, so pretty close by. Two fun rivalry there. Back to the top of the bracket, Utah Tech earning the bye at the first round, so they came in the 4 seed. And this is a team that is really interesting to me. They lose Emily Isaacson really early. I don't even know if she played a game this season. They have the preseason player of the year, and Brianna Gillen. They had Macy and Maddie Warren, the twins, who were on fire. And then really we were devastated to just find out from JD Gustin that, Macy Warren had torn her ACL, which she did last year. Both the twins tear their ACL last year. They rehabilitate together. They get back out there. They're on fire. And now it's just Maddie kind of finishing out the season for her sister. But when you look at this team who has so many pieces, they had a massive win over Oregon this year in their gym. Brianna Gillen posted a triple-double there. If this team can find a way to play together and shoot lights out, where do you anticipate them going in this bracket?
Yeah, so JD Gustin's team is quite interesting, right? Like you said, they lost Emily Isaacson with an ACL injury. They lost Macy Warren with an ACL injury. Amber Karshner hasn't played a minute this year due to injury. So, there's pieces missing here, but when they hit shots, they're almost unstoppable. Stephen F. Austin felt that on Saturday when Utah Tech won that game to get a first-round bye, right, to get a bye to the quarterfinals. So Brianna Gillen is a triple-double waiting to happen every night. Maddie Warren is one of the best three-point shooters in the WAC. Maggie McCord can go for 30 on any given night. So the thing with that side of the bracket is if Utah Tech can hit shots, they can get to the WAC tournament championship game. Because UT Arlington, if they get by Southern Utah, that quarterfinal game is going to be a fast-paced, up-tempo game, throw up as many points, maybe first one to 100. Same thing with CBU. It's going to be the first one to 90, let's say, in that WAC semifinal on Friday, because all those teams like to play fast. They like to shoot threes. They like to attack, and they don't play a lot of defense, if we're being honest. So if Utah Tech, if JD Gustin's crew can hit shots at Orleans Arena, don't be surprised to see them playing for a WAC tournament championship on Saturday morning, you guys, not Saturday night. Saturday
marking
morning.
that down here.
That's
If Utah
right.
Tech makes shots, pencil them into the finals, said Kyle McDonald on the WAC
Jared
podcast.
also might kill me for that, even though he's one of the most laid back guys in the Western Athletic Conference. So
on the other side of let's go back to the purple side of the bracket. We mentioned in the men's, we have the Texas side and then the non-Texas side. And this one we have the purple, and then we have the non-purple. Stephen F. Austin awaits the winner of Tarleton State and Abilene Christian. SFA under new coach Len Bishop, who has been a longtime assistant for Mark Kellogg. who went on to do great things at West Virginia, had him in the top 25. What was he, like 12-6 in the Big 12 this year, one of the best conferences in the nation. And Jordan Harrison was averaging, I think, 13 points a game starting for the Mountaineers this year. So a lot of players left. We saw Avery Brittingham go to UTA, but the cupboard wasn't completely bare. And Len Bishop has steered this team to the number 3 seed and not a bad position in WAC Vegas.
No, I mean, you think about it, Mark Kellogg, when he first took over, he only had 18 wins in his first year at SFA. So Len Bishop has passed that. Second off, Leonard Bishop is one of my favorites because he is a no pineapple on pizza kind of guy. So we're happy about that. Okay, so we could be, him and I could be friends. But no, I mean,
pineapple belongs on pizza. Sorry.
No,
Yeah, we're both pineapple on pizza people.
Okay, I'll respect you, but I don't agree with it. I'm just going to put it out there.
But my pizza's gluten-free, so it's not even worth having.
No, but, you get Kirsten Harden back, who isn't a first-team All-WAC selection, a big paint presence there. Tyler McCall's back. Kyla Deck's back. Destiny Lombard, who's the WAC Defensive Player of the Year. So he had pieces back, and they just took off, right? They surprised me. I didn't think they were going to do as well as they were because first-year head coach, you lose a bunch of the scoring and starters from last season's team. There's a lot of question marks, right? And here they are. They're in the 3 seed, and they're like you said, they're in a really good spot, Eric, because they can beat both Tarleton and ACU, and they beat GCU twice. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see in that all-purple bracket who comes out of it because SFA has beaten all 3 teams, kind of like UTA or Tarleton on the men's side in that bracket on the Texas bracket. SFA is similar in this all-purple bracket. So they can defend if they get physical, it's just, I don't know. I like this SFA squad. I think they're going to be very good. And I think Leonard Bishop has this team figuring things out, or they've already figured it out, and they're playing well right now. Like we said, they just beat GCU last week to basically ruin the Lopes' chance of winning a regular season title. So, and they played well against CBU. They took CBU to overtime. Remember, they took CBU to overtime in Nacogdoches. What was that, a week and a half ago now? Kirsten Harden, those 3 free throws, which she never should have been fouled in the first place, but she got fouled on that 3-point attempt. And so they can beat anybody, and they have the size and they have the experience and they defend. So watch out for SFA.
We'll have our first look at our number 1 seed in California Baptist when they're going to play at noon. And so this is a team that really excites me as well. Jared Olson named WAC Head Coach of the Year, and also Chloe Webb, the Player of the Year. This is a team that's been to WAC Vegas multiple times. They won it one year when they weren't able to go. They were in the championship last year. Having this bit of a break all the way to a bye, what do you think this team needs to do early on in order to, keep up with a team like Utah Tech or UT Arlington or even Southern Utah, who's going to be coming in with a lot of momentum here?
Score. Like, that is score. And I say that with how, I don't know the words to say it, but CBU just scores, right? Like they'll play a little bit of defense. They'll get the stop when they need to, but they want to outscore you. They want to score 100 points and beat you 100-90 if they can, right? That's their goal. And with Chloe Webb, you have a player that just is almost unstoppable. The only time she's stoppable is when she stops herself by getting into foul trouble. She fouled out with 4 minutes left in regulation against GCU in that overtime win on Saturday. And that's the only time she really gets into trouble. Also, CBU didn't play with Felipa Barros, their starting point guard, did not play on Saturday. She was out with a sprained ankle. She'll be back. Chloe Lemon missed almost all of February before coming back this week, specifically for the GCU game. So it's a dynamic team, and Kinsley Barrington's there. She can hit threes. She can play around the rim. Jared Olson, all he does is win. Like, all he does is win, right? Like
no matter
you said,
what. as the
Right.
song says.
I put that in one of my articles, Eric. I did about that DJ Khalid stuff when I put him as one of my WAC Coach of the Year candidates. But you think about it, they went undefeated through the regular season and the WAC tournament back in 2020-21. The year after that, they made it to the semifinals. Then last year, they made it to the finals and got, beat by a good Southern Utah squad. This year, this is 2 outright regular season titles in 4 years for the Lancers, and 3 trips, well, technically, 4 trips, 4 straight trips to the WAC semifinals at least. I like this team, and they've won 7 straight, and they're doing it in a variety of ways where they're winning close games because they have a player that they can put the ball in their hands in Chloe Webb. But they can also defend and play a little bit lower scoring games. So they're never out of it because of how quickly they can score. And that's just Jared Olson and his relaxed style of basketball and just letting his players play. I think one story from this year, I was at their loss at Utah Valley. And at one point in the first half, he was more upset at his players for complaining to the officials about calls than he was about the fact that they were actually losing the ball game. So Jared Olson's a great coach, and he's doing big things for CBU, and they have one of the best players. Well, as voted on by the coaches, they have the best player in the WAC, and I think they're going to do something special this year again, like they kind of did in 2020-21.
Yeah, Chloe Webb's pretty interesting to watch. 21 points a game. I think she's averaging almost 8 rebounds a game as a guard. But you mentioned CBU is such a 3-point shooting team, but she's not necessarily, I mean, she can shoot the 3, but that's not her first look is for the 3. One game I was watching with that 23 pointers as a team, set the school record. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes together in Vegas. And I'm also excited to see, Kyle, if her uncle, Terrell Davis, is back in WAC Vegas as he was last year at the Orleans, the NFL Hall of Famer, the gold jacket, the Super Bowl MVP, NFL MVP. But, you wonder, I mean, the family bloodlines there. You got a tremendous athlete there, and Chloe Webb has seemed to follow in his footsteps in a different sport.
Well, and here's the thing. She loves to attack, just like her uncle loved to attack the line of scrimmage when he had the football. So she is a fun player to watch. And even after Utah Valley beat CBU a couple of weeks ago in Orem, Dan Nielsen said, she's just the best player in the league. That's Utah Valley's head coach. And she was the unanimous WAC Player of the Year voted on by the coaches. So the only one that couldn't vote for her was her own head coach, because you can't vote for your own players. But, 10 of 11 coaches voting for one player to win that award tells you the whole story of what you need to know about Chloe Webb.
And how about this team in Grand Canyon that got the 2 seed? And it obviously was an incredible battle the last game of the regular season between California Baptist and Grand Canyon. Should we see that matchup, that should be really exciting. But you look at Grand Canyon, and this team has so much depth and so much talent. You wonder, with how they have this much depth, how is it possible to take down this team, what Molly Miller has done with this program? And then you look at Nadia Evans. If this team is ever in a tight spot, Nadia Evans just has ice in her veins. She's going to knock down whatever need be, and potentially a matchup against Trinity San Antonio's former team in California Baptist. What do you like about this Grand Canyon team? And I mean, how do you slow them down? Just like kind of on the men's side, they're just completely stacked.
The thing is defensively, they're really good. They get after you, right? They forced, I think it was 21, 22 turnovers against CBU on Saturday. And, they still lost in overtime, but still, the fact that they turned people over, and they blew Utah Tech out of the water by 40 in St. George. They blew out UT Arlington by 35. So they have the capability of doing those kind of things. The question is, can they do it consistently for 2 games, right? Because they've struggled offensively in a lot of ball games, but they stay in games because of their defense. Like you said, Nadia Evans, what is her deal with hitting big-time shots? Montana State, she hit the buzzer beater. The opening game against St. Mary's, she hit the buzzer beater. There was another one against Arizona State that she hit. And, then there was one on Saturday to send the game into overtime. She banks it in from 3-point range. And then in overtime, she has a 3-pointer like bounces up, bounces all over the rim before falling and getting fouled. So what is her deal with hitting big shots? You got to have a player like that when you're in the conference tournament, right? And so that's big. Trinity San Antonio, I feel like she's so good defensively that it almost takes away from her offense, because I think she could be dynamite offensively. And so I think she's going to have to be in 2 games. She's going to be a little bit better offensively, maybe 15, 16 a game in both games if they're going to win it all. Tiara Brown, she missed some time with an injury, but she's that player. She's that Molly Miller type player that just plays hard, gets after it defensively, rebounds, and she could be a takeover type of player as well. And then you add the Eric Strip twins. Olivia Lane is there in the paint too. They have pieces in place here. It's just, which GCU team are we going to get? Are we going to get the one that struggles offensively and wins it by their defense? Or are we going to get the one that's consistent and blows out, a Utah Tech or UT Arlington like they did in the regular season? So, Molly Miller, they haven't quite gotten over the hump. I mean, 2 years ago, they were close, but they run into SFA in that WAC tournament championship game. Last year, they ran into Southern Utah in the WAC semifinals. So, now you have another CBU squad who she lost to in her first WAC tournament championship game in 2020-21. So, there's so many funky stories with the Lopes under Molly Miller and the WAC tournament that it's it's kind of like the goats, the curse of the goats, Billy Goat for the Chicago Cubs. Can they break that curse of Orleans Arena, I guess you could say, we'll call it. So, but GCU is very deep, very talented, very veteran-led squad, and they could win it all. Just a matter of, can they be consistent for 2 games?
So we usually finish this up, and I don't know if you can share this with us, Kyle. Your predictions for the winners.
Yes, we always
Vegas
ask this every year.
Every year.
Wins.
This doesn't go out till tomorrow, so I don't know if this is a WAC Hoops Nation exclusive.
No, we're doing our straight out of WAC after hours. So technically, it's not going to be exclusive, but I won't put out my picks until tomorrow after this comes out. So I won't release those on the show tonight. But I'm gonna. The men is so hard, you guys. I'm gonna stick with GCU, simply because they've just been the best team the entire year, right? They haven't had these waves of up and down. It's been consistent the whole year. That 2-game road trip to West Texas was kind of an anomaly of the season, but they've been the most consistent team. I'm going to pick GCU to win the men. I do think that the semifinal between either Utah Valley and whoever plays GCU in the semifinals from that quarterfinal game, if it's Seattle, it'll be an intriguing matchup because Seattle had GCU on the ropes twice. But UT Arlington, I can't take my mind off of them and getting to that game, knowing that they had GCU beat twice. I'm going to say GCU is going to win it, but I'm also going to say keep an eye on UT Arlington, 100% on the men's side.
And then on the women's side?
Ooh. Oh. You know what? I'm going to go off the deep end here, and I'm going to say SFA Lady Jacks get back to the NCAA tournament.
Whoa.
Ooh.
Now, hear me out on this one, okay? They beat Grand Canyon twice.
They did.
In Phoenix and in Nacogdoches. Both games were close. But, the Lady Jacks played defense just as good as GCU does, and the Lady Jacks have a little bit more offense than GCU does. So that's what I'm looking for there. And then in the final game, I mean, I think it's going to be CBU in that championship game, but don't be surprised if Utah Tech beats CBU to get to that championship game.
Ooh.
If, like I said, if Utah Tech can hit shots, they can play with anybody in this league. Okay. And because those games are going to be so up tempo and so both teams in whatever game on that non-purple side will probably take 80 to 90 shots per game because that's how fast they're going to play. Like that's how many possessions they're going to have. But I think Leonard Bishop's SFA Lady Jacks are primed for it. And I'm going to pick the Lady Jacks. But I'm also going to say don't sleep on Utah Tech women. JD Gustin's team is pretty darn good when they get rolling. And, they just beat the Lady Jacks. So, yeah, keep an eye on them.
So there you have it. Kyle McDonald's pick, Grand Canyon on the men's side, potential for UT Arlington. Keep your eye on them. On the women's side, Stephen F. Austin or Utah Tech, maybe a little California Baptist. You never really know, but you're picking Stephen F. Austin. And to summarize, so that all gets underway March 13th through the 16th at the Orleans Arena. Everything will be on ESPN Plus. We do have some linear games as well. The second semifinal game, which will have Tarleton State and either UT Arlington, ACU, or Stephen F. Austin, will be at 8:30 p.m. Pacific on ESPNU. Our men's championship.
On Friday.
On Friday. And our men's championship on Saturday will be on ESPN2 at 8:30 Pacific. And our women's championship will be live on you at 10:30 a.m. on that Saturday Pacific time. So really excited to get multiple linear games. You can also catch it on the radio at SiriusXM for the semifinals and championship. That's new this year. So that's another way you can catch the WAC tournament. Kyle McDonald, I want to thank you so much for joining us, the founder of WAC Hoops Nation. Really appreciate your insight. We'll see how it all pans out, and we cannot wait for WAC Vegas. Thanks for listening to the WAC Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the WAC Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website at wacsports.com.